In today's video, I wanted to delve into Gary Stevenson, the wealth tax propagandist, and sort of look at the other groups that he works with and try and emphasize that he is not a solo campaigner. And my main thesis is that he's part of a propaganda network that includes Zoe Gardner and Grace Blakely, young people churned out to promote policies for international socialism. And we're seeing this sort of revival of momentum, but led by the Green Party. Anyway, to set the scene, most people know Gary Stevenson by now. He's got his own YouTube channel, Gary's Economics. He's got a book out called Trading Game. The YouTube channel has 1.48 million subscribers at the time I last looked. And he's kind of cultivating this image rather like you'd expect him to grab the same audience that maybe Stephen Bartlett has, The Diary of a CEO. Young people, young ambitious people that want to know how to make it. They want to know how Gary did it. He's got a relatability factor. But the YouTube channel, in my opinion, is very clever because it combines economic issues like compound interest and tariffs, and then it always comes back to Gary's punchline: we need a wealth tax. It's always coming back to that. So it captures people and it gives them buy-in because he sounds reasonable. He sounds like, hey, I could be Gary Stevenson too. Maybe I can make it in the city. But then it's always coming around to the wealth tax. Now, I think that Gary Stevenson, so he had this trading career and it seems to, according to LinkedIn, it ended in 2014. I think that he, at some point, may have gone through the New Economy Organisers Network training school, NEON for short. This is a Quaker and Soros-funded left-wing training school. And it basically produces propagandists that the left can use to push out what they want, the international socialists. So it gave you Zoe Gardner and Grace Blakely, and Faiza Shaheen is the other one who's been a very vocal supporter of wealth taxes. This just goes in with their whole manifesto. They want the wealth taxes. And NEON even supplies scripts. Well, it's got a script on how to plug a wealth tax. This has been on the scene, in the works for quite a long time. And Gary Stevenson, the evidence that he's worked with NEON is he's put on their channels, they normally only put people that they've trained up on those channels in terms of plugging their TV and radio appearances. And he's on it for years now, since 2021. And Gary Stevenson also, this isn't a secret. He works with a number of groups that really want a wealth tax, and they're quite global in their remit. This is why I say it's an international socialist campaign. So one is Patriotic Millionaires. Stevenson is a founding member, but there's also a US and Canadian version. The US version is led by Abigail Disney and Maurice Pearl, who's a former managing director at BlackRock, among others. And you'll see, if you look at these groups, you'll see everywhere they've got these tax the rich signs, and you will be so familiar with them because you get these now at protest groups. In London, there was recently one called Make Them Pay, and Faiza Shaheen was there. And Make Them Pay, it's all, the thing you got to realise, it's just all the same people. It's just always the same groups and people. Greenpeace, the one that want a wealth tax, has a really big left-wing lobby for it. And it can be hard to think of the left as lobbyists, but they have so much wealth. So Patriotic Millionaires isn't the only one, but it is interesting that you need assets of at least 5 million or an income of 1 million per year to be part of Patriotic Millionaires in the US. And we're supposed to believe, like Gary Stevenson finished with Citi or wherever he was a trader in 2014. He's also a wealth tax advocate, so surely he would have given away all that wealth. But he is part of this group, so that's apparently how much wealth he's got at the moment, if the UK version is anything similar. You've then got Millionaires for Humanity. It's just similar people. It's Abigail Disney all over again. There's also Brian Cox. And they've got really similar campaigns to the ones we've seen in the UK. That they've got some on their website like Tax the Rich EU. And I mentioned Tax the Rich EU because another organisation pushing wealth taxes is called Tax Justice, and there's a UK version which Stevenson is fairly embedded with. He's promoted their content, a tool to write to your MP. But the wider Tax Justice network, it has funders including Soros, and to come back to the EU, the European Commission. Does that mean the European Union wants a wealth tax? I ultimately, just to say, I don't actually know what the big driver behind this wealth tax is. There are lots of wealthy people who want a wealth tax, and some of the wealth tax lobby also does seem connected to what people might call the deep state. Interestingly, Millionaires for Humanity, which Stevenson is part of, as well as Abigail Disney, says that it's ultimately linked to something called Human Act, which arrived on the scene with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, which exposed and exacerbated the deep-rooted issue of global wealth inequality. And basically, it's calling on the world's wealthiest individuals to contribute at least 1% of their wealth annually to support the Sustainable Development Goals. Those are the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Anyway, it cannot be emphasized enough that the wealth tax lobby is huge and it's all interconnected. They're always at each other's protests, and you always see the same group of activists involved, normally anyone that's associated with Neon. More recently, they've been on the Green Party podcast. I actually started predicting who would go on because it's so, once you work out the network, you work out who they're going to get on as organic activists who will then talk about points that the Green Party, who are actually socialists, or the international socialist community want. And that's what I ultimately believe Gary Stevenson is, a type of Corbynista lobbyist, essentially, being presented as a Stephen Bartlett relatable figure.